2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brandon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us.
How do I support my adult child who struggles with addiction?
What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Tyler. We're brothers.
We're therapists.
We're not afraid of your questions.
So bring it.
All right, Brandon, this is going to be a good topic today. Again, you're out on the road. You live the dream now these days.
Well, yeah.
Your new office is the golf course.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, I still work hard.
Yeah. Well, we have a guest today. Danielle has been willing to call in, and so Danielle, welcome to the show. So glad to have you on.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Love the podcast. Love it.
Awesome. Well, why don't we just jump in? Why don't you just share whatever background you want to share, and then ask the question that you want to talk about, and we'll get into it today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not a therapist. I pretend to be sometimes, but I'm not licensed by any means. But I have been doing my own recovery for probably about 5 years, depending on how you look at it. But I've been really deep into recovery and doing my own work for the last three and a half years. And through that process, I really wanted to give back. And so I volunteered in a church capacity to lead groups to support spouse and families who have somebody that they love that struggles with addiction. And I have a couple groups now, and one group in particular has become mostly parents who have grown children who struggle with addiction. And I've just noticed that, number one, I've been searching for podcasts to be able to give them. And I've seen a lot of podcasts where how do I parent children that are like little and still in their home, and those kinds of things, or it's a lot of like the spouse relationship. And so I'm wanting to be able to provide a podcast to them. And so I asked you guys, knowing that you would give such great content for me to be able to hand to these wonderful, wonderful parents who love their children so much. But they struggle because the dynamics are different, and they have different, concerns and different ways of dealing with the relationship with their child who is grown, an adult.
I just first want to say that the reason you may be asking this question, because Danielle, you've done a lot of recovery work. You could probably teach a lot of people about addiction and recovery and all those things. And maybe the reason why you're asking this question is because it is one of the most difficult questions. Is as a parent, what do you do to help an adult child overcome addiction? It can be so challenging and so difficult. But there are some answers. So hopefully we can shed some light for you and for them to really give some ideas. And if anything, speak to the position that they're in so that they know that it's normal and they know that it's okay that they're feeling a lot of the feels that they're feeling. Because it is a tough position to be in. I've worked with a lot of parents of addicts, drug addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction, all kinds of addiction. Tyler, he did that so much, right? Tyler, you have a lot of experience working with parents of addicts as well. So it's a really good question. So where do we start?
I want to ask you, Danielle. The question is a nice broad question, and there is a lot that we're going to get into here today. But
and I have more questions.
Cool, yeah. So my question back to you is what are the main, if you were to kind of strip it down to the main things that these parents are bringing in week and week out? What are their biggest concerns? What are the biggest struggles? What are they facing that seems to come in week in and week out?
Okay, I have like 5 different things, but we'll strip it down and you tell me how much time we have. When I see somebody first come in to a meeting, maybe they just found out, because a lot of times it's been a secret. Maybe they've had their child out of the home for a very long time and had no idea that their child had struggled with addiction, probably from a young age. So a lot of things that they'll have to deal with is like the shame and the confusion of, how did I not know? How did I not know that this was happening? And then I've heard that they are quite isolated because there is so much shame around, I parented this child and now they're struggling with this huge thing. And there's so much stigma still around addiction. So they feel like they are going to be judged. And then when they have been vulnerable, sometimes they'll get really hurtful things said back to them. One of the ones I've heard recently was like, do you wish you would have never had them?
Yeah.
Which was hard. And, like, how did you not know that this was happening in your home? Like those kinds of things. So when I first see somebody come in, and I know that we talked about like wanting to really normalize how normal this is, and to help them know that they're not alone. I'd love for you guys to speak to that if you could.
Sure. It's funny how I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that parents bring in all the time is shame breeds shame. So if there's a child who's struggling and based off of shame, they've got an addiction that they've hidden for a while, and all of a sudden it comes to light, then the shame almost like jumps over onto the parents, and the parents now go, how could I be so foolish? And how was I so dumb? And this is probably my fault. What did I do to wound my child? Like, where did I go wrong? The shame then starts to breed more shame. And then a parent is not likely to actually seek out help and support because they're worried that they're a bad parent as well now too. And so the very thing that their child was doing, they now start to do themselves. And it just sort of like is this cycle of continual shame where we're both just rolling around in it, me and my child, and we're never actually able to get the broader perspective or context of saying, hold on a minute, like addiction is a massive thing in our world. Like you could look left or right at your neighbors, and there's a pretty good chance that one of your neighbors is struggling with something very similar to what you're going through. And we never get a chance to see that context because we're so busy covering up our own feelings of shame and feeling like, oh no, there must be something wrong with me, or I'm terrible, or I must have been a bad parent.
The Danielle, do you have kids?
Yes.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I've got 2. I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Oh, you're busy.
Yes.
So if you have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, then you're getting pretty well versed in the fact that as a parent, you're always failing.
I remember the day.
I have 4 kids.
I remember the day when I had that just all of a sudden understanding of, oh my goodness, I judged my parents for not being perfect. And wow, I've just realized that I'm never going to do this perfectly.
No, and no parent does. And I think, most parents do the best they can. And sometimes the best they can isn't great. And there are consequences for the kids because the parents aren't great. And a lot of times they're doing what they were taught by their parents. But here's my point is that as parents, we are going to screw up and we're going to make mistakes, and those mistakes are going to hurt our kids. And I actually do believe sometimes those mistakes really propel our kids into things like addiction and things like depression and anxiety. And I don't think we can take it all on us, but the reality is that our imperfections affect our kids. But can we be able to say, look, I really am doing the best I can. The things I've done have hurt my kids, and I need to provide or I need to allow some grace and forgiveness for myself, and love and compassion for my struggles, so that I don't have to continually beat myself up over and over again because my child is suffering. Because to me, that's hell. Like the pain of my children, what's worse than that? And if I think that I've inflicted that and I sit in that and I wallow in that, that is so hard. And I've got to be able to say, you know what, like I really truly need to forgive myself and accept my imperfections here, so that I'm not spinning in my shame over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
So easier said than done. Yeah, go ahead. I have
a question kind of in that vein. So I don't know that if we've talked about it, yes, it being normal and moving on, and you can circle me back if you want to, but I just have so many questions for you guys. But I do see where, okay, so I've been studying the grief process in my own recovery, and there's this piece of anger that we have to get through. And I have seen where, yes, some parents have felt anger at the situation or even at their child's behavior because it's creating consequences in their lives that they are just heartbroken about. But then, of course, immediately they feel shame and guilt for feeling angry at their child. Or I have seen it where they absolutely put off that anger altogether, but I've seen it where they take that anger and they place it on themselves instead. Yes. So they project that anger onto themselves. And so I wondered if you could speak to that. How do they not get stuck in that blaming themselves? Because I have people in my group who have been doing this for 20 years and they're still in that struggle.
I think Brandon brings up a good point to the question you just asked with what he was saying. And Brandon, I'm going to make it simple for what you were saying. Is one of the ways to freedom here is to find the place where you can take accountability and own it, and then be able to surrender the rest and allow yourself to experience compassion and grace the same way you hope that your child will experience compassion and grace, because at the end of the day, we're all totally human. And to your question, that grieving process is interesting. When you have an adult child who's got an addiction, it's not like your typical grieving process where you lose someone and they die, and then you kind of go through those stages of grief and you go through anger and bargaining and depression. When you've got an addicted child, you cycle through that 100 times over before you or they die. And it's an ongoing process where you get hope and you think, oh, maybe there's a turnaround here. Maybe this is the chance it's going to be different. And then all of a sudden it's back to the same old things that it used to be. And you're right back feeling like you started over again. And that anger is something that I think needs to be like validated as, hey, this is part of the process. The anger I have towards myself, the anger I have towards my child, it's okay for me to be angry at myself or my child, and I can still love my child. I've got a really good friend who's got a son who's currently in the drug courts, and this is the best he's ever done. He's been addicted for probably 10 or 15 years. He's finally gotten into the legal system, and he's finally getting sober, and they're kind of getting more and more hope. he's been sober for almost a year now, and he overdosed and relapsed just a couple of weeks ago. And instantly, what happens to those parents? It's all back to all is lost. I can't believe it. What do we do now? Do we kick him out of our house? Do we send him to prison? Like what happens now? And I'm so frustrated because now I've opened my heart again and I've given him another chance. And now that they've gone and stopped on my heart again. And, it's just, that's a normal part of the process. And so I think it takes an insane amount of, we call it in our practice, we refer to it as ridiculous patience with ourselves and with our child, where it's ridiculous. Like when you think you've been patient, when you've been kind and offered grace to yourself and your child, you've just started. It's ridiculous because that's what it demands when you're a parent, because you can kind of shut it off and say, oh, I'm not going to care anymore, or they're dead to me. It only takes a couple of months before that heart of a parent comes back and says, oh, I really wish the best for them. I want to support them. I want to figure out how to help them. And the struggle is then, like, how do I best help my child while I'm still dealing with that anger that I've got, but I still have that love for them? And what is actually helping versus hurting? And maybe that's another question we'll get into in a sec, but it's normal. And I think there's a lot of room for grace and patience in this process.
What Tyler's saying, and Danielle, I know you've been through this yourself in your own work, but there's this real, I don't know why God does this way exactly, but there's this real paradoxical nature to healing. And we naturally run from pain or avoid it. And anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is a part of grief, but behind that anger is some real hurt, some real sadness, and some real fear. And if we want out of that anger, whether it's anger at ourselves or anger at our child, then the way out is to step in and to sit in it some, to process it, to allow yourself to feel it. And if you're shooting yourself out of the anger, or like, I shouldn't feel angry, then you're going to stay angry. Or if you're pretending like that anger is not there, but it is, then you're going to stay angry. And so the paradoxical nature is we think that we're not supposed to feel it. We think that we're not healing if we do. And the way to healing is to actually allow yourself to heal it and to process it.
Can I highlight something that you said?
Yeah.
So I really liked it when you said that if we try to ignore the anger and put it off, that we'll stay in it. And I've seen, especially in Christian culture, and like the church that I am in, where anger is not of God, right? But I disagree with that, because I believe God feels all the emotions.
Amen.
But you think, okay, thank you. And I've just seen it where people, and if they feel angry, they feel that shame. They feel like this is not something I should feel. So they should on themselves, and they try to push it away because they need to re-engage and be able to show up as a dad without any anger,
especially as a parent, as a parent, right, Danielle? Like, I'm not supposed to feel anger toward my son who's addicted to drugs. Like, that's so selfish of me. I shouldn't feel that. Right. Well, the truth is I'm scared for him, and I'm, or I'm really, really sad. And so behind that anger is some real actual love for my child. But I won't get to that love, and my child won't feel that love unless I say it's okay to feel this anger that I'm in right now.
If I could add to that, if we were to use the Christian perspective for just a minute, we know that God is love, and yet you read in all of the scriptural texts, my wrath is kindled against you. I'm angry. The Lord seeth fit to chasten his people. Like, there is a way for love to still have room for anger. And sometimes we mess that up as people, because like our anger leads to pretty poor decisions sometimes, because it's not done from a place of love. It's gone into that secondary place that Brandon's talking about. But we're lying to ourselves if that's not part of our human condition. And anytime somebody does something against our values, especially the people that we most love, one of the natural responses, the protective responses, is anger. And so, yeah, we need to probably be careful with how we respond in anger. And I like where Brandon's going, that we should use that as maybe a sign to look deeper and say what's behind it. Because often what's behind it is what really needs to be addressed, but we shouldn't dismiss it. It should be used as a signal instead of villainized as part of the process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does come mostly from fear, because with their addiction, most of the time, as being an adult, their addiction has probably progressed quite far. And so they may be looking at consequences that are quite big, like death, insanity, jail, like those big consequences. And so of course that's going to bring up so much fear, which as just a defense and having that secondary emotion of anger come up totally makes sense.
Yeah. I want to, going along with what you're saying, Danielle, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and throw a question out to you guys, because I think this dilemma is the dilemma that parents of addicts really struggle with. And I think if we can kind of analyze it or chew it up, maybe it could help. But, and it's the tough love thing, right? Where, as a parent, you get in this place of, do I keep them comfortable in their addiction, or do I really hold some boundaries? And that leads to some crazy things, like my child being homeless or overdosing or whatever. And years ago, I had a client who was the nicest guy, just the most humble, nicest guy, who had a horrible alcohol problem. And he was living in his parents' basement, and he was drinking all day long, drinking. And his parents came in, and they were the most loving, kindest, and they loved their son because their son was such a good guy, right? But this darn addiction was there, like just destroying him, and he hated it, and they hated it. And they came in. He realized, he said, my parents are enabling me here because I just sit in their basement. I don't have to pay rent. All I have to do is buy alcohol. And so they came to this agreement of, hey, if you drink again in our basement, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And he went a few days, and sure enough, he started drinking in the basement. He spent a whole day drinking. And so the next day he humbly accepted that they asked him to leave. And so he packed up his bags and went and overdosed and killed himself. And the parents were devastated. And the parents came to me, and they were like, I don't think we did the right thing. Our son's dead now. What do you guys think?
Brandon, this is the question. This is the question for parents of adult children who have addiction, is like, and I don't know that there's a right answer to this, Brandon. I think it truly is. This is between the parents and God. But there are some principles here that need to be discussed and talked about and signed up for, depending on what side you fall on. So the example you gave, Brandon, I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've heard similar things where it's like, well, if I kick him out, how many parents, Brandon, do you know that have adult children living in their basement right now, and they won't kick them out because they're afraid they'll go overdose? Like, that is the thing, right? So then you have a parent come into your office and they're complaining to you and saying, yeah, I don't know how he's ever going to get better. And you're like, there's no consequence for his choices right now.
You're basically buying his drugs.
Yeah. You basically are supporting his addiction. And they're like, yeah, but if we kick him out, then he's going to go overdose and he'll probably die. And the truth is that these are hard things, because, when you get that far gone, when you're that far into that situation, it's like, there are really some real consequences. Like when I worked for the drug courts of Southeastern Idaho, it would end with an overdose, or it'd end with the legal system, or it'd end with rock bottom and massive change, or it would end with suicide. And those were the four options. And so when a parent looks at those things and goes, geez, like, man, the odds are terrible. I'd rather just watch him die a slow death in my basement and feel like I was loving him than to have him go out and make choices that are going to come with,
you can't blame a parent
with massive consequences. I don't blame a parent at all. But what I will say to a parent is that the parent needs to know that they're signing up for all of the other consequences that come from having your child stay in the basement, and you pay for their housing and their drugs and everything else
while they live a slow death.
Just sign up for it and accept that that's what you're going to do, instead of being upset or resentful or angry about it, because at the end of the day, that's the choice you're making to keep them in your basement. Versus, the risk of saying, hey, son, like that example that you gave, Brandon, my heart aches for those parents, because I tend to lean towards the side of saying, I know their hearts were good. I know that they were trying to be helpful. And the truth is, they probably maybe did the right thing, principally speaking. They set boundaries. They were loving. They said, hey, son, like, you got to go figure this out. We can't continue to help you. We can't continue to watch your life unravel in front of our eyes and feel like we're part of the problem. And then he goes and he does these things. You can see their pain, and you can say maybe they did the wrong thing, but on the other hand, they were acting according to true principle.
Well, but Tyler, so I absolutely, to be honest with you, I really questioned whether I wanted to continue to be a therapist after that, because I had counseled them to go through that process, and then that's what happened. And so I wasn't the parents, but I was definitely a part of this whole boundary thing. And I had to soul search and say to myself that, yes, like, my counsel was spot on, that I was actually fighting for his life. And I was speaking truth. And I believe that the parents in actually holding that boundary were fighting for their son too. And it was a risk, and it backfired. But in the end, I think that it was the best shot that they had. And so, like, what you're saying, Tyler, you're saying it's truth. And I always err on the side of step into truth, even if it's hard, rather than live in denial and avoid the hard reality. And so that's the only way forward. Danielle, you got a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. First off, that yes, I just want to say that is so hard, but I do know that this is a story that happens, that where parents are trying to get healthy. And my comment was, I feel like those parents, what they're doing is inviting their child to get healthy, and also inviting them to have a healthy relationship. If you really break it down to relationship dynamics, you are inviting them to become a healthier them. Yes. But those consequences are hard, and it is hard when they don't choose, or when they don't choose the help.
I think that's the biggest thing here is that we often forget that every single individual in the equation has choice. And as parents, we take more responsibility for our children's choices than we can and should. Yeah. And when those decisions happen, we define ourselves as success or failures based off of our children's choices. And that also, that's not necessarily the right measuring stick. It kind of makes me sick. When we get people come to us and be like, oh, you guys must be awesome parents. Your kids did this and this, and they're so amazing. And it's like, well, actually, I know lots of parents who do the same things and their kids don't do that and that, so it's not the outcome of the choice of the child that makes you a good parent. It's truly the work from the inside out of saying, do I have a set of principles that I believe in and that I live by and that I try to teach my child? Do I allow them to make choices and experience consequences for those choices? And do I love them through that all the while? And if that's the case, then that's becomes like, Brandon, those parents, I feel so bad for those parents, because they were good parents. And they had the outcome that was just excruciating and rips your soul out to think about it. But at the end of the day, they were still good parents.
Yeah. Tyler, when I worked in the kind of the system, the court system, I did this intake, and it was this mom who had never done drugs, and she was coming into treatment for a drug charge. And I was like, what in the world is happening? Well, she was out buying drugs. She was out buying heroin for her son, and got busted for buying heroin. And I was asking her, I'm like, why, what are you doing? She's like, at least I knew what he was getting. At least I knew what he was getting. I could kind of give him the dose, and I knew it was clean stuff. And like, so that's the other end of the spectrum, right? There's the parent saying you can't live in my basement. And then there's the mom out buying heroin for her son. You know, and to me, it's clear as day to me what fighting for your child is in those scenarios. It's not she is killing her son.
But she can't tolerate the thought of losing him to death, so she would rather eat that herself and not feel guilty about the fact that he might die. And Brandon, I want to tell you a small story, like really, really just with what you're saying. When I was on my LDS mission in Baltimore, Maryland, we were teaching a woman, and she had a heroin addiction, and she was trying to get into rehab, but she couldn't get into rehab because there was a waiting list. And so I took some of my money and I bought heroin for like 3 days. And on my church mission, I bought heroin for 3 days to get her her fix until she could get into rehab. And then she got into rehab, and I never saw her again. And I felt so terribly guilty about that. But on a certain level, like, I can relate to like what a parent, imagine with me as like some stupid missionary, but what about a parent who has their child going through that? It's like, holy cow, like I can totally see why a parent would be on the street buying heroin for their child. I just also think they need to understand what you're saying, Brandon, is that what they're doing is they're giving their child a slow dose of poison. They're preventing them from being able to have a chance to grow into full adulthood. And eventually that child is going to go down to the rock bottom one way or the other. And if you don't want to feel guilty about it, that's fine. But you have to acknowledge that that's what you're doing when you go and buy heroin for your child. Right.
Yeah.
And then I've seen it a lot where they may not have like that close relationship with their child. Their child keeps them really, really far away. So they have no idea how they're doing or what they're doing, but they have them pop up when they need money.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle. So it's my overall question when I first started this, and then I came up with more questions, was how do I support my child who struggles with this? And so I know that you guys are talking about love, you're talking about boundaries, you're talking about these different things, but can you speak more to like that, writing that line, and what does love look like?
Could I give an example? Would that be all right? I've got I'm going to kind of tell a story, and I hope it's okay with my partner, Chase, but Chase struggled with some addictions in his life. And my wife is a perfect example of what your question is. Over the years of the struggles that he would go through, periodically he'd call up and he'd need money, or he would, need something. And every time my wife would sit and have this conversation with him, and it sounded something like this. She'd listen to him. She'd say, "Wow, Chase, I love you so much. I can tell you're in a really bad spot. I care so much about you. And if I could help you, I would. And if you wanted to move out to Utah and live with us for a minute while you got your feet under you and played by our rules, I'd love to do that, but I'm not going to send you money. What you're doing is against my values. I don't think I'd be helping you. I love you." And then she'd hang up the phone, and then she'd cry for like 3 or 4 hours. But I just thought, her example was such a beautiful example of the balance between love and boundary, where, hey, I love you, and these are the ways that I can support you, and these are the ways that I won't support you because I don't believe I'm going to be doing any good for you. And I think that's the essence that you're going for, is to find, but you have to be in touch with what your values are in order to ride that line, So Rihanna knew what her values were. She could stick to those values, and she knew she loved her brother desperately, and she ached for him. But go ahead, Brandon.
Well, she's a good example of what I'm going to say here, which is healthy boundaries. When they're actually healthy boundaries, they're acting in authenticity and in your real values, are showing up with love. So, I had a client when he was 14, his mom found a bunch of porn under his bed or whatever. And so she thought she'd do him a favor, and she beat him up because she's going to teach him a lesson about that being bad. That's not that she's controlling, and she's not showing up connecting to her son in any way. And so you like, there's that side of the fence, right? Where you're overly punishing and trying to control them not to do it by forcing them. That's not love.
And Brandon, most of the time, that side of the fence is driven from a selfish place instead of a selfless place too. It's driven from their own feeling of not being a success or being a failure as a parent. Which is exactly what was happening. You know, she was very rigid in her religious beliefs, and she was sick that her son would do such a thing. And, you know, which, by the way, her beating him up just drove his addiction further underground and perpetuated the whole thing. But then there's the other side of things. You know, if my daughter, say, came in my house and she was addicted to drugs and she stole everything, and she stole a bunch of money and everything from me, when she came back the next time, I can do what Tyler's wife did and say, I love you so much. You know, but love might be, I'm sorry, but you can't come in our house right now until I have trust again, or until I feel like there's some recovery there. So I can still be loving in my heart. My heart cannot be at war. I can have compassion for her, and I can still be boundaried at the same time. So does that make sense, Danielle?
Totally. And I have kind of a question that goes within that, I think. I have seen where you have two parents who want to try to execute things differently, and that affects their marriage. Where one wants to do maybe more tough love and wants to hold boundaries and is saying, like, I don't think we should allow them in our home, and I don't think we should give them any more money. And then this parent is just, they're dealing with their own grief and their own hard time. And so they're wanting to maybe give more. And that creates like friction in their own marriage dynamics. Do you guys have any, can you speak to that? Is there any?
What are you talking about, Danielle? Addiction never polarizes marriages and relationships.
It's hard. There's no chaos with addiction.
Oh my gosh. It's every time, all the time with parents. And it really is, to me, why help is so important. Education together, getting involved in Al-Anon, S-Anon, education together, so that you can get on the same page, because it is so tricky and nuanced and all those things. So if you do get that support and education together, you can come back to that and say, yes, like this, let's do this because this is what together we're supposed to do. But it will, if you have an addict child, it will test every part of your relationship.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is that you get the balance of, if we're looking at the ideal parent balances boundaries and structure with heavy love. And sometimes the parents sort of personify each side of that. And what goes on is that the loving parent sees the boundaries as harsh, and so they go more loving. And then the boundary person says, well, you're being too easy, so I got to go harder. And pretty soon you're getting justice and mercy from two different people. But it doesn't work that way, because then the mercy person is slide money out the back door and like, hey, don't tell your mom. And the mom's like, God, you're always letting them off the hook. Like, do you realize what you're doing? And pretty soon you got a marriage problem on top of just the addiction problem. And that's what Brandon's saying is so important, is we both need to get educated. We need to learn the same language. And then we need to learn how to communicate with each other in a principled way, so that we're coming back to, instead of letting it get personal, it's got to be based on principles. Like, how are we going to balance love and boundaries and structure? Like, we've got to agree on the fact that both of those things need to be in place, instead of each person like doing one or the other, because that really does end up with really strained marriages. And then that's more pain, and there's more burnout and everything else that goes with it.
I just really liked, I know if somebody's listening to this, they couldn't see visually what you were doing, but like with your hands, you were saying when somebody does more love and somebody does more boundaries, you could see that those two people are like disconnecting from each other. They're going farther away. And with addiction, with a child that you both love, it seems like you would want to. I love that you're saying get educated, because then you guys can learn, what does healthy boundaries look like? How do I support my grown adult child? And you become together, and then you're able to be more unified. And that's something that I just want to say from my own experience, having done my work. I know my children are young, but going to therapy has been more beneficial for me as a parent. I've been working on my own childhood things, but it's been so beneficial for me. And I've changed how I've parented based on working my own trauma that I had in my childhood. And I haven't seen as much, depending on the generation, of them maybe seeking out therapy. And I just think that would be so wonderful if they could do their work, and that their work not just based on fixing their relationship with their child, supporting their child, but really about their own stuff. Because when we heal that, we don't have the shame screens that come up, when people come and say, oh my goodness, like, you have a child of addiction. You've done your work, where you stand. And because of that, you can hold things differently, and you're able to hold the hard stuff for your kids and have those hard discussions without your own shame coming into the picture. And I think that's the biggest benefit.
I think that old adage is true, that if you want to support your kids, then get healthy yourself. Like, that's it, like that. And I absolutely appreciate parents that come in. When I meet with them, I'll do an intake, and they come in and they don't say, how do we get them to stop? They say, we want to work on us so that we know how to navigate this. We want to make sure that we're on the same page together as a couple, as a marriage. We want to make sure that we're like really doing what we can to show up as healthy as possible. And it's those parents that really can thrive and navigate. The parents that want to just get their child to stop and don't want to really deal with it, it doesn't work. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, Danielle, because you're spot on. You want to help your child, you might have to work on some of your hardest stuff, work on your own shame, work on your own lack of boundaries and fear of boundaries and poor attachments in your own life. And then you'll show up powerful and connected to your child and support them.
It sounds weird.
Be safe.
It sounds weird that the best way to help your child is to become more shame resilient yourself, but that's simply the truth, because shame resiliency, it yields less obviously shame, but it also yields the ability to have better boundaries, because we allow ourselves to be treated right up to the level that we believe we're worthy of being treated. And when we are resilient to our shame, all of a sudden our ability to hold those boundaries and those values increases itself, and we can do it from a place of love instead of a place of fear. And those boundaries held in love, because I'm shame resilient, they speak differently than a boundary that's made out of fear to a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And just giving my own example, my daughter the other day, I was talking with her and trying to explain something that she wasn't hearing, she wasn't understanding. And my words were kind, but my face was kind of like, can you not understand this? And she got angry and wanted to walk away from me because I was hurting her with my facial expression. And I caught it and I realized it. And I said, oh, honey, did mommy's face tell you something? Did it bring up shame? We've talked about shame. We actually talk about it and what does shame say to us and things like that. And she said, yeah, it really hurt my feelings. And it made me feel like this when there was kids at school who were not kind to her. And I said, I want you to tell me anytime that my face does that and it hurts your feelings. And I want you to be able to talk to me about it. And I think it's being that safe parent. I've learned, I've dealt with addictions as a child and I've dealt with it as an adult. And especially in my adult relationship, when I was able to be safe, meaning that I was approachable, that I wasn't, bringing up my defenses and the thing, as soon as something was said to me that maybe was hard to hear, that I wasn't putting up defenses. I was really sitting there and able to listen. And I think that that's what therapy has given to me, to be able to show up as a safe parent, to teach me those principles, which is awesome.
You know what a hard thing is, though, is you're talking about parenting and showing up safe for our kids. And I'm just thinking right now, my kids are up at a lake and I just made them all put on life jackets. If I were to ask you guys, Tyler, Danielle, both of you, can you control your spouse?
Nope.
Danielle shaking her head like
No.
Automatically no. Tyler, can you control Rhiannon?
No, of course not.
It's obvious when I ask that question, right? It's like, can we control our spouses? No. In fact, it's unhealthy if we try to. But when it comes to our children, we, when they're young, there's a level of structure, and we could even go as far to say control, that we have over our children. And so when an adult child grows up and they're acting out with addiction, we still have this part of us as parents to say, like, okay, like, I'm going to get this to stop. And the fact of the matter is, if they're an adult child, the truth is you can't control them. That's done. That part of life is over now. And they're like your spouse in that way, that you can't control them. And so then you shift from trying to put the structure and the control, and you try to figure out how to have healthy attachment and love with them so that you can support them. And there's a difference between supporting them and trying to force them and control them. And I think that's really hard for a parent to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that makes much sense.
Yeah. Well, Danielle, we're getting up close to our time slot. Any last thoughts or questions that you wanted to ask?
No, I think I think we actually, through the flow of it, we touched on so many different things. I just really, really appreciate it. I know that this will speak to so many people in my group, but I'm hoping it will be something for, people who are parents and are looking for help, and they don't know where to go and what to do. And they might be sitting in that isolated spot to just maybe seek help, and then, learn and get educated on how to be able to hold space for their children, how to be able to surrender and not control, but also create and cultivate happiness in their lives. I really do see them. Sometimes this overtakes their lives, and it's the one thing that they focus on, and it really takes away from the rest of their lives too. And I don't want them to have that. I want them to be able to, yes, my child struggles with this, and I love them, and I'm going to support them in this way. And I'm also worthy of having a happy and joyful life too.
That's awesome. That's a great last thought, Danielle. Thank you so much for your willingness to come on and share yourself and your questions this way. You asked some really good questions that I know really tug at the heartstrings of a lot of parents. So if you guys are listening to this and you know someone who has an adult child who might be struggling, please pass this along and help them to get the resources that they need, because it is something that isn't readily available to a lot of people.
Tyler, can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge you, Danielle, for you've been through some hard stuff, and personally, and you're working through your recovery. And I just want to notice how you're taking the crap and turning it into something beautiful, and you're helping people, and you're facilitating groups, and you're here with us asking questions for parents. And I just really want to applaud you. It's just awesome to see somebody take a hold of recovery and turn it into more than just about them and their healing. And so thank you, Danielle. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been healing. It's been a part of my healing process to be able to help others. I said, all this stuff happened to me, and I've learned so much, and I have all these resources, and I don't want that to go to waste. I want to help people. But yeah, it's been a big, huge healing piece. And I know David Kessler, who's worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on the transition of grief, added that 6th step of finding purpose. And I really have taken that and I really want to do something. I want to be a part of this recovery world, because for me, recovery was one of the biggest answers I could have ever had. So I'm just so grateful for all the content you guys put out, because that's where I started. I started in isolation, listening to you guys and your podcast and starting to implement it. And then I got brave enough to get into therapy. And that's really where things progressed.
Well, don't stop. Keep going.
No.
You're doing awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Danielle.
All right. Appreciate it.
If you guys have questions, go to therapybros.com and submit them. You're more likely to get on the show if you want to come on and talk, but if you can also submit a written question, we'll try to get to it when we can. So thank you guys. Have an awesome week.